Welcome to Cardinals Cover 2 with Grialou and Mike Jurecki. Cardinals Cover 2 is brought to you by Arizona Cardinals Podcasts. Visit azcardinals.com/podcasts. From the Dignity Health Arizona Cardinals Training Center, here's Grialou and Mike Jurecki.
Wrapped up ahead of schedule, but not before some news was announced, and really some big news. Yes, the annual league meeting is done, and we'll get to the news. Historic news, and all truthful. But I'm not sure, MJ, how anxious everyone is really to leave the Valley, given the weather during the meetings Sunday through Tuesday afternoon. Because I know this, the media does not want to leave. And then I was watching Arthur Blank do an interview on NFL Network, and he even made a comment about the meetings wrapping up a little bit early, and then he kind of looked up in the air and said, I don't know if I'm ready to leave this weather.
Hard to, especially when you're coming from the East Coast or even, down there in the South where, they still get cooler temperatures. Obviously, everyone's hoping for a nice little warm spring. And then you had the ASU Pro Day today. Yep. We'll get into some of the details a little bit later in the show. And so you had a lot of general managers and personnel guys stick around. And, a lot of like Mike Tomlin in previous years, he usually brings his family, hangs out with the pool for him for a couple of days. Now, with all these pro days going on and everyone getting ready for the draft, it's a little bit harder to add a vacation to it, maybe a couple of days. But for the most part, very successful, and groundbreaking what happened yesterday. We didn't know which direction it was going. And when you lock people in the room, and I think it was Bruce Allen, the president, the head honcho behind Daniel Snyder, he said, in the NFL, we are a deadline business. Lock them in a room. Do you guys want to go home tonight, or do you want to come back here tomorrow and we'll haggle this out? And they locked themselves in a room and they got to vote. It was 31-1. The only team that abstained or voted no was Cincinnati. So for the most part,
and they always vote no, especially when it comes to instant replay.
Yeah, exactly, and they're consistent with it. But I'm glad we get that kind of information. But yesterday, and we'll see how it plays out. But obviously, I think looking at the Saints and Rams game, and even if you want to go back to the Brandon Cooks, they could have put that ball on the 1 yard line. So I thought Sean Payton was very consistent, and he was powerful what he was saying, even when he was sitting there yesterday at his table with the breakfast. He laid it out. I said, listen, if you want to go down this road, you're open to criticism, and people are going to start looking, like, okay, how serious are they taking this, considering how much money people are paying for tickets and how much these networks are paying to play these games. So to me, and I didn't know this, but Jason Garrett also played a major role in it. So, you got some guys that were more vocal than others. And again, we'll see what happens for the upcoming season. But, a lot of people are concerned about the time of the game. And the NFL prefers it to be somewhere between 2:55, maybe 2:58, and 3:03, 3:05. If you have overtime, there's nothing you can do with that, even though you only go 10 minutes. So I don't think it's going to slow it down. Plus, we're talking about one challenge, and you got it. And if you see a pass interference in the first quarter, if it's a 60-yard bomb, you're probably going to throw the flag. But I want to hold that flag until the fourth quarter, and we know all scoring and turnovers. Our booth reviews, including in the last 2 minutes of the half and at the end of the game. So it's fascinating that this thing got through, because a lot of times they table it, and then it's a 1-year experiment, like the kickoff last year. Now that's permanent. We'll see how this is officiated and how the coaches approach it, because if it goes according to plan, they're probably going to use this permanently in the future.
Yeah, use the word groundbreaking. It's a perfect word to describe the increase in instant replay, and we'll touch on that here on this Wednesday afternoon. But right now, let's tell you what's ahead on the show here as we come to you from the Dignity Health Arizona Cardinals Training Center. Kingsbury, Josh Rosen, and Kyler Murray. Those three have been joined at the hip in recent weeks, and nothing this week changed any of that. Speaking of Murray, you'll want to hear Sal Paolantonio's thoughts on the Oklahoma quarterback. The ESPN personality will join us. The newest episode of Cardinals Flight Plan debuts this week. We've got another great sneak peek, and of course your questions via social media using the hashtag CardsCover2. Hashtag CardsCover2, using the number 2 to get involved in the show. But first things first, the news of the day, and we're going to begin kind of in our own backyard, so to speak. And it was announced on Tuesday that the Cardinals had signed a wide receiver, Damiere Byrd, to a one-year contract. Spent the past 4 seasons with the Carolina Panthers, although his first season he spent it on the practice squad. Hasn't seen a lot of time, only appeared in 17 games, including 3 starts, so his numbers not great. 12 catches, 129 yards, and 2 touchdowns, but he is much better in the return game, both kickoff and punt. And you and I, MJ, had a chance to speak to a couple of the Panther beat writers. A couple of things. One, great kid. He's just 26 years old. So you've got that, meaning he's good in the locker room. And then the second thing is, because he's only appeared in 17 games, you want to know why? Well, he's been injured. He's been hard to kind of stay on the field come Sunday.
Yeah, and, if you look at the dimensions in his 40 time, I mean, he fits what you would think from a Kliff Kingsbury offense. I mean, I don't know how many slot receivers they're going to have or outside guys. I would think, according to Kliff yesterday, he thinks Christian Kirk and Larry Fitzgerald will play both on the inside and outside. I think Kevin White is a guy you're going to put on the outside. And then it's a matter of, you start looking at some of the younger receivers. So curious to see how they approach it. I still think they'll address it in the draft. It's still from a far finished product, and then we'll see how it shakes out. But, again, I do think they'll keep 7 wide receivers. Maybe we'll see 5 or 6. But this is competition now because you usually just 4 or 5. So we know that Christian Kirk has been effective in the punt returning game. And then Farrell Cooper, we really haven't seen it. We looked at it from afar, and he was pretty good. He made the Pro Bowl the year before. So, and again, you can flood the position, but competition is great at every position personally. But I like to see one of or 2 of these guys step up at that wide receiver position.
5'9", undrafted rookie free agent from South Carolina, and 2 seasons ago he set a Panthers franchise record with a 100-yard kickoff return against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So you look at Kevin White, you look at Damiere Byrd, Farrell Cooper, Christian Kirk. You've got guys who, as you say, you just flood the position as far as the return game, but then maybe whoever's not returning could get an opportunity at wide receiver. I'm going to keep throwing Farrell Cooper's name out there when you talk about that wide receiver room, just because I know, 1, he wants the opportunity, and 2, you look at the roster, someone needs to step up in that room.
Yeah, and if you're going to be active on game day, you have to do more than just one thing. Now, I don't know how many times we're going to see 5 wide. I would assume that you're either trailing or you feel like you're going to create some matchups. So if you're that 4th or 5th receiver, it's likely going to be you have to play on teams. And we know that Tolliver and Sherfield definitely played on teams. Cooper's more of a returner. And then you throw in Byrd, he's more of a returner. So it'd be interesting to see who makes the roster, and we're a long ways from that. But at the same time, though, you're creating competition at certain positions, and I think that's what the entire coaching staff wants to do. Nothing's going to be given out. We can pencil in starters, but at the end of the day, they're going to put the best 22 on the field.
Yeah, so a second wide receiver added here in free agency by the Cardinals. Now we'll see what they do, even in free agency, of course, with the draft coming up in just a couple of weeks. Also, the Cardinals Caravan stops in Holbrook this afternoon. Corey Peters is the special guest. azcardinals.com/caravans for more information. And a busy week for Peters. On Tuesday, he joined Big Red for a Gatorade Junior training camp for 150 special needs students from Gilbert at Greenfield Junior High. We always talk about the good guys in that locker room. Yes, Corey Peters, outstanding player, but for me and my money, an even better person. So tip of the cap to Corey Peters, and, of course, in Holbrook later on this afternoon. All right, not only the news of the day, but the news of the week with regards to the entire NFL. And yes, instant replay is expanding, at least for 2019. Pass interference, both offensive and defense, will be reviewable, and coaches will be able to challenge non-calls for pass interference. Here's Competition Committee Chairman Rich McKay with the explanation.
Instant replay has been a topic that I think I've been discussing with all of you for a long, long time, and we probably will for a long time. It is, for us, a tool that has served us very well, and this year was probably about as good for us from an efficiency standpoint as we've ever had. Shortest amount of review time. The reviews from an accuracy standpoint were outstanding. So now we get to the play that occurs in the championship game, and here comes a discussion of how can we expand it. I think I give the coaches a lot of credit and the members of the committee a lot of credit. We went in with the idea that we were absolutely willing to expand it. Now the question was going to be how far and for what. And the reason that we made the proposals for the DPI and OPI was that we had data that said these are the most impactful plays, and that's what replay was designed for. So we went down the path of trying to figure out a rule that would expand replay, that we could get 24 votes for. And anytime you deal in the replay world, 24 votes is not quite as easy as you think. And we came up with rule proposal number 6, rule proposal 6A, rule proposal 6B, and we passed rule proposal 6C. So we definitely, we were able to make sausage in one day, which is good for us. I think we ended up in a really good place. This is the first time that we'll have a foul such as DPI, OPI be able to be reviewed when a flag's on the field, or actually cause a flag, throw a flag, whether that's the challenge by the coach all the way up to the last 2 minutes, or whether that's the replay assistant buzzing down, stopping the game, and having Al review back in New York. So in essence, what the rule does is it puts OPI and DPI into our replay system with no change. So the system is exactly the same, but OPI and DPI are now reviewable. And that includes when a flag or no flag. We've never done that before. I think the coaches made some good cases. I think that the committee, I give our committee credit. There, we were at a 4-4 kind of split committee on the idea of putting a flag down. We worked through all of the processes, all the concerns, and we got to 8-0 and made the submission this afternoon, and then it passed in flying colors, 31-1, which for replay, if you guys know the history of replay, 31 votes for us is a lot. So that's what we did. We had some bylaw proposals, some resolutions, nothing overly impactful. I think you'll get them, but I think replay took the majority of our time. We also took 2 proposals in replay, one by Philadelphia that was plain rule proposal number 13, and one by Denver, which was plain rule proposal 15. Both of those were replay proposals. We put those into ours, which is 6C. So those are now part of the permanent rule. One, Philadelphia's is an interesting one. It is the fact that now if there's a scoring play and that play is going to be negated by a penalty, then Al in New York would be required to look at it and confirm the scoring play so that the coach doesn't have to decide to accept or negate the penalty before he knows whether it's actually a scoring play, which is what our old rule used to provide. So that was a good catch by Philadelphia and a good fix in our opinion. And then John Elway's in Denver's was that all tries, don't think of the extra point because we've never had one reviewed, think of the 2-point play, all tries are automatically reviewable. The reason is we got ourselves in a position where coaches weren't sure, hey, am I supposed to challenge this? Am I not supposed to challenge this? So we just said when it comes to tries, they're automatically confirmed and reviewed by New York. So that's what 6C encompasses. It has OPI, DPI, and then it has those 2 rules in it. That is all I have, unless you want to get
a lot to digest there from Rich McKay, but first things first, this obviously has everything to do with the NFC Championship game. The, not disagreement, but the impasse that there was, that the coaches wanted this for all calls, ones that were flagged or not flagged. And then you heard McKay say, well, the competition committee was kind of split because they just wanted offensive and defensive pass interference, if flagged, to be able to be reviewed. And the coaches really pushed back. And yes, it's Sean Payton, but there were other coaches involved. And just from reading and listening over the last 12 to 18 hours, it sounds like this is I wouldn't say the first time, but one of the rare times in which the coaches really push back, got their way, and say, look, this is what we want. And I know people are going to say, MJ, that, okay, now games are going to be extended by 20, 30 minutes. All right. Well,
I don't see it.
Stop for a minute. The number of challenges has not gone up. You only get 2. You'll get a third if your first 2 are successful. And then, of course, the last 2 minutes of the first half and second half, that's a booth review. So that hasn't changed any. Those rules, those intricacies hasn't changed. So you're only adding an additional call. Now, what's the historic part of this is the first time that a judgment call can be reviewed. And that's, as we've heard, it's a slippery slope. Okay, now you've started with pass interference. Okay, what's next? Holding? I mean, so that's could be where we're headed, but at least for right now, it's about trying to get the call correct. I'm interested to see how it works, but remember a year ago at this time, the big rule was lowering the helmet, and everyone was up in arms. What happened? Well, you know what?
A little point of emphasis in the preseason.
Not a huge deal.
No.
It happened. It was taken care of, and
because
everyone adjusted.
Right, and besides officials coming to each training camp, coaches got videos on when it comes to what's targeting and lowering the helmet, the crown of the helmet, whether you're going to the chest or the upper body, including the head area. Then they can throw a flag. But there was this huge, from former players, you know. I remember Ron Wolfley and Bertram Berry saying, you're hurting the game. Yes. And here we are a year later, and really that wasn't even a topic of conversation. So I think the point of emphasis you'll see in the preseason. We're curious to see what happens in the first couple of weeks. It'd be fascinating if, you know, you see a guy run down the field 40, 50 yards, and all of a sudden there's pass interference, and they're going to use that challenge. This is interesting. Besides them, you know, protecting the quarterback, and they've tried to do that because without healthy quarterbacks in the NFL, you don't have a good product. And we know they're 32 quarterbacks, but you know, probably 20 or 25 you can rely on to possibly win a game for you. And other guys are just younger, but you don't see a lot of rules towards the offense. And when it was initially brought up yesterday in the afternoon, we all just thought it was going to be defensive pass interference. And then Richard Sherman says, figures, you know, we're defense. And really, I don't know how many rules it's been. I would say 45 or 50, and they've all been towards player safety, which is obviously the defense laying the lumber. And then a couple hours later, it did come out and say offense and defense pass interference. So that's, to me, finally the offense is getting a little bit of credit there where everything has been geared toward defense. Now, as for wide receivers, I was listening to Troy Vincent on Sirius XM radio this morning as I was driving in. And he mentioned, you're allowed to have contact at the line of scrimmage and for the first 5 yards. He said, but when you see a receiver, get off the line of scrimmage, try to win the press coverage, and he makes that quick, out pass. At 5 yards, he's still physically, somebody is pushing somebody, whether it's a wide receiver pushing somebody or it's a DB. And he says, we're going to be looking for that. So it'd be interesting to see how many offensive pass interference calls we get versus it was automatic defense. You grab a guy if he gets past you, or if I'm struggling in coverage, I'm going to try to get over there and maybe grab his jersey. So that was something that Troy Vincent brought up this morning. I never really thought about it. And, some of these receivers, they like to get off press coverage, and then while they're running down the field, they, to a point, they want to get a little separation. And I just wonder, are they going to grab a guy and then all of a sudden, that to me, that penalty on the field will be called there. You don't need to challenge that.
No, it's just a matter of, okay, if you're going to challenge, whether it's offensive or defensive, is, first quarter, okay, what point of the game? Is it for a first down? Is it for a 60, 65-yard gain? Is it for a touchdown? That all has to be decided. But in the last 2 minutes, and I heard this yesterday as well, and Sean Payton brought it up, that the Hail Mary, well, there's a heck of a lot of contact into ball game, but that would be from the booth. Coaches couldn't challenge that, but now you open up the door for, okay, it's an exciting play, it's close, you're going into overtime, or it's a game winner, and the ball is caught. Wait a second, was there contact? Or the ball is incomplete. One team goes to celebrate. The other team's like, hang on, let's go review. And now there's this delay for how long, who knows. That might be that door, Pandora's box, if you will, as far as, okay, we're letting you have this, but here's the consequence, potential consequence, because now we're allowing you to challenge or review, at least in the last 2 minutes. If the booth says yes or if New York says yes, okay, judgment call. What are you going to decide? Because remember, the NFC Championship game, that was inside of 2 minutes. So that would have come from the booth. And the reason why you had non-calls now added to this is because there was no flag thrown on that play. So the only way that play gets reviewed.
3 flags. Yeah. Holding on the offensive left tackle, and then whether it was face guarding or pass interference. There could have been, 2 flags on one player, 1 flag on another player.
Yeah, that's why when the competition committee came back 4-4, they wanted the flag thrown, and the coaches pushed back. No, if there's no flag thrown, we want to be able to challenge or have that reviewed because in the NFC Championship game it was just a no call. And so I'm very curious. I don't think it's going to lengthen games all that much, if any at all.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a couple extra minutes. I mean, again, you're adding one challenge, and you got to get the first two right in order to have that one. So I think coaches will be selective, and if it's a big play, I don't care what quarter it is, because at the end it could hurt you, then I think you're going to see more of those challenges, if possible, more in the third, if not even late in the fourth quarter, before you get to the 2-minute warning.
And a reminder, this is just for 2019, and they'll see how it goes, and then if it's successful, then they'll make it permanent. But this is, I wouldn't say a trial, but it hasn't been put in for all time. It's just for 2019.
Yeah, I don't know how you can tweak it anymore. And like the kickoff rule from last year, that's permanent now. I mean, they're not doing this they're experimenting, but they think this is going to work, and that's why they were able to get the votes they needed. When you go 4-4 and then 8-0 and then 31-1 when it comes to the owners, if this thing doesn't have any, something could be brought up that where how do you do that, but they're never going to get to a point where you can throw a challenge flag on holding and stuff like that. So I think it's here to stay as long as it goes according to the rule and it's officiated and it's called from Alberto Riveron in New York the right way, which obviously his job's on the line.
Yeah, a couple of other rule news that were discussed during the annual league meeting. The one that we talked about regarding overtime with the Chiefs, each team gaining a possession, that has been tabled to May's owners' meetings, and there's now been discussion as far as maybe allowing that in just the postseason, not in the regular season. And then the other proposal about the onside kick that the Broncos brought up, 4th and 15 from your own 35, that was voted down. I thought that was kind of interesting. As opposed to going for an onside kick, you get a 4th and 15 from your own 35 to try to maintain possession, but we'll see if that doesn't come back around.
Yeah, some people thought it was gimmicky. I didn't. I mean, again, if you're down 2 scores or 1 score, and you got to go to the length of the field based on down and distance and how much time's on the clock, let alone how many timeouts you have. I mean, yeah, 15 yards isn't easy, but at least you get a chance to possess the ball, and you get a chance to go down the field. Now, obviously, if you're down 2 scores, you're going to have to do it again. But I would think teams, if you're down by 4 points or more and you got to get a touchdown, that would be another option. So curious to see. I was hoping they would table it, but that's not the case. We'll have to do this drill again next year at this time.
Yeah, it is a Wednesday afternoon here. Cardinals Cover 2 from the Dignity Health Arizona Cardinals Training Center, broadcasting as we always do in our Bose QC35s. Just go to Bose.com for more information. All right, also from the annual league meeting, the head coaches breakfast, just picture a big ballroom with 32 head coaches at 32 different tables, large round tables. I don't know if every coach was there. I didn't do a head count, but some arrived early. Sean Payton was there early to make sure he had his chance to talk about instant replay. Some coaches arrived a little bit later, i.e. Mike Tomlin, but they were peppered by questions from the media for about an hour. And, of course, Kingsbury, very, very popular, which was to be expected. One, it's in his own backyard, and then two, of course, it's the number 1 overall pick. And the discussion that he had with the media, as you'll hear right now, dealt with that number 1 overall pick, Josh Rosen's fit with Kingsbury and what he wants to do offensively, and, of course, the ability of the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, Kyler Murray.
You just want to make sure you're thorough when you have that number 1 pick. I mean, that's a pick that can change your organization for many years to come. And so if you're not doing, all your due diligence possible, then I think it's a mistake. And I know Steve and Michael feel the same way. And so it's been a very extensive process at the Combine and going out and seeing all these people. And I feel like we're doing a good job of gathering the information. People have said a lot of things that are misconceptions, if you will. But Josh is a tremendous player. I always thought, watching him at UCLA, he played his best football in a spread system that had some similarities to what we do. And, he's a tremendous thinker, very cerebral, can throw it with anybody. And we take a lot of pride in building the system around the quarterback. So for somebody to say he doesn't fit our system doesn't make sense. I guess it's more what don't you like, because there's not, when you watch him play, he can run it, he can throw it. He's a competitor. he was one of the better Texas high school players to ever come through our state. So I don't know if there's one thing you can pinpoint, but he's one of the better dual threat players, to ever play.
Couple of things. Kingsbury was asked later on about that number 1 overall pick, and he kept saying in different ways that, look, nothing's changed since the last time I've spoken to you. And yes, no decision has been made. The 120 board hasn't been set. Now, could they be leaning one way to over the other? I'm sure. But as far as getting everyone together in the room, that hasn't happened yet. It's supposed to, according to Kingsbury, coming up next week as we get closer and move into April. And no decision has been made regardless of what the speculation is as far as what the Cardinals will do at number 1.
Yeah, and I don't think we're going to know until draft day. I really don't. Until the commissioner says they're on the clock. I mean, I could be wrong, but that's going to be a fascinating, exciting day because they're going to get a good player, whether they stay at 1 or move down a couple spots. You're going to get a really good player, whether it's on the defensive side of the ball or, in this case, possibly an offensive player, in particular the quarterback. Now, when you look at Kingsbury, I like the comp there because people look at him as Mayfield. Mayfield's a little bit thicker. Russell Wilson, even though he came in at 205, he's much thicker. I don't think he's Lamar Jackson.
You're talking about Kyler Murray, and the Michael Vick.
Kyler Murray. I think Vick had a stronger arm. He could just flick that ball 60 yards. But I think speed-wise, Vic ran a 4.25. We don't know what Murray would have ran. Now he's 2.05. I would assume a 4.33. But he's more dynamic, better pocket passer, making decisions inside the pocket. So I think that's a good comp that Kliff mentioned. Again, different quarterback, stronger arm. Vic was a little bit quicker in the open space. But I think when you look at the arm strength that he has in the pocket, the fact that he threw close to 90% of his throws from inside the pocket, and we're talking 6'4", 6'5" offensive lineman, he's able to find lanes like Russell Wilson, buy a little time to roll out. So I think that's a really good comp. And again, different quarterbacks, different time now, but you could see the upside in Murray and how he's going to be able to flourish in any kind of offense, but more in particular, a guy that is familiar with him, like the air raid concepts with the RPOs.
Yeah, he heaped praise talking about Kingsbury on Murray, but he also had great things to say about Rosen as well, and that's kind of getting lost in all of this discussion is everyone talks about fit. And yeah, maybe Kyler Murray does fit better, but that's not to say that Rosen wouldn't have success within this offense. And I think to a certain extent, Kingsbury, it's almost an insult to him when he hears or reads that, oh, well, Josh Rosen is not a good fit, so he can't use him as quarterback. Well, as a head coach, you're supposed to coach up your players. It doesn't matter because are you going to have the best fit at running back, wide receiver, you can't get the perfect player for every position. That's why, at least to me, it's, Kingsbury was hired because he's a good quarterbacks coach, and he had a number of different ones, successful ones in college that moved on to the NFL. They weren't the same quarterback. They didn't do the same thing. Now, there are different things that quarterback A does better than quarterback B, and I think that's what the Cardinals right now are weighing with regards to Rosen versus Murray. But to say that Kingsbury couldn't do what he wants to do offensively with Rosen, that to me doesn't sit well.
No, and it shouldn't. I think under the right system and the right coaching between Tom Clements, Kliff Kingsbury, of course, they went out and addressed the offense. I think Josh could flourish. Okay, it's just a matter of, there's little things you'd have to work on. I mean, again, Murray's a little bit different quarterback. But I do think they have similar traits when it comes to throwing the deep ball, throwing in tight windows. I think they both can be effective. I just think you protect Rosen, get that running game going, get some wideouts and some weapons on the outside. He can flourish in this offense. But again, it's a matter of what do you want to do with that first overall pick? I look at Nick Bosa and Quentin Williams, and I'm thinking those are no-brainers. When we were going to the combine, I just assumed Rosen was going to be the guy. Now, obviously, we didn't know Murray was going to check in at 5'10", and once that happened, everything was off the table at that point because the Cardinals aren't the only team that likes Murray. There's other teams that like him, so it'll be interesting to see. But I do think with the right coaching and you give him enough time in the offseason, I think Rosen could also flourish in this offense. Now, is Murray, 9 out of 10? I don't know. I put Josh right up there, and he's got more experience. Murray's only played, 13, 14 games? Josh started, how many games last year? 13?
13.
So, and he's got NFL experience. Now, granted, it's not the greatest film, but he showed some progress. He showed his upside. So I think he can flourish in this offense now. It's just a matter of what they prefer long term.
More draft talk. We had a chance to catch up with ESPN Sal Paolantonio during the annual league meeting, and he made it quite clear what he believes the Cardinals should do with that number 1 overall pick.
I got 3 words for you. You ready?
Go ahead.
Draft Kyler Murray. That's
Why?
really, I think it puts the Cardinals on the map first and foremost. I think you have to have a marriage of a coach and a quarterback. That's the proven method to winning long term in the NFL. Have ownership that supports the coach and the GM in getting players, and the coach has to be married to the quarterback. You've seen it work in Philadelphia. I've seen it work in New York. Obviously, we've seen it work with the New England Patriots. I look at the offseason and I look at, okay, what is a team doing to change the balance of power in its organization and its division? And there's only one move that the Cardinals can make that does that, and that's to draft that guy and see if he can play. We know he can play at the collegiate level. He has a certain skill set that no one else has, maybe other than Patrick Mahomes. I think he's better than Lamar Jackson. He's a better passer than Lamar Jackson, clearly. His productivity and his leadership were proven at Oklahoma, and I think you didn't hire Kingsbury to coach Bosa. You hired Kingsbury to coach Murray.
Okay, and I understand that. That's what a lot of people believe. On the flip side, though, is you have so many holes coming off a 3-13 season. You have that number 1 overall pick, and maybe because you drafted a quarterback a year ago, you've solved that, you hope, and you look and try to fill up holes on the defensive line or at linebacker or somewhere else with that number 1 pick.
I think when Kingsbury says Josh Rosen fits our system, he's saying Josh Rosen's available for trade.
All right. What do you think then, if that's the case? What have you heard as far as is there interest in Rosen's availability, if there is availability?
I've heard that the Giants do have some interest. I've heard that the Redskins do have some interest. I don't know firsthand whether the Dolphins do, although that's been reported. But if you're asking me if I have inside information about the Dolphins, I do not. I don't have any inside information about the Patriots' interest, although I have heard that they do. But I wouldn't speculate on either the Dolphins or the Patriots. I think that, the biggest thing is how much can they get for Josh Rosen if they trade him. But I actually think, my opinion is that you're better off drafting Murray and keeping Rosen, because you can't get enough for Rosen. Once you draft Murray, Rosen's value drops right through the floor. Once you pick up the phone, even before you draft Murray, if your general manager picks up the phone and calls the Giants and says, what do you think of Josh Rosen? I think he's worth a 5th-round pick. That means he's for sale. Okay, so that's the starting point. You see what I'm saying? So they're in a tough spot to get value back for Josh Rosen. And what I mean by value is a 1st, 2nd, or high 3rd, where that what I would think would be value for Josh Rosen at this point. I don't know enough about Josh Rosen as to whether or not he is worth that. I haven't seen a lot of his film. I haven't really talked to the young man, so I don't have any kind of firsthand knowledge of his ability, and I don't really want to speculate or talk out of school. All I know is this. If you're going to draft Murray, you can still, I believe, keep Rosen and have a better value than trading him away, because you really need, I learned from Philadelphia, you need 2 quarterbacks. You do. And Rosen's probably worth more than a 4th or 5th round pick to you, because as a backup, if something happens, God forbid, you still have somebody who can play, and he can play.
So you're saying he's a better option in August than maybe April, because if somebody goes down? Or what about distraction? What about looking over the shoulder?
Yeah, that's why Kingsbury was hired. I mean, that'll be a difficult thing, sure, absolutely. But having just gone through that for 3 years, you can still negotiate your way to a Super Bowl with that. If a player gets injured, because you have a backup who can play. What I do know is this. If you don't have a backup who can play, you got no shot.
All right, let me ask you this. On paper, Rosen, $2 million, $2 million, $2 million for $6 million over the next couple of years. If he exceeds it, $21 million would be his fifth-year option. Is that intriguing to another team out there?
Yeah, I think it should be, for sure. But, I'm not evaluating Josh Rosen as somebody who can come in and play for my team. So I don't know exactly what Dave Gettleman's thinking. I don't know exactly what Jay Gruden is thinking, And they've got to talk to the young man. They've got to do their due diligence about his past injuries. And they've got to find out, okay, can he play? Does he want to play? Does he need it? Does he need a fresh start? All those things are unanswered questions, for sure. But to me, he's worth more to the Arizona Cardinals on my team than a fifth-round pick. You see what I'm saying?
Sure.
You don't want to give him away because he has great value as either the starter with Murray on the bench or as the backup with Murray as the starter. Now, how does Josh Rosen handle? That's the big unknown question, and I think that's what you're getting at. What happens if Josh Rosen just out of hand rejects being on the team, walks out, whatever? I don't know if that could possibly happen, or it just becomes such a problem that it interferes with Murray's development and the development of a first-year coach and a first-year quarterback. That's an unknowable thing.
All right, you've covered a lot of drafts. How do you see this playing out? We've seen previous years when the Eagles and Rams wanted to move up, they made the trades a couple weeks before, even 10 days. We didn't know about Baker Mayfield maybe to the 48 hours before. So what do you think happens when the Cardinals are on the clock on draft day?
I think they draft Kyler Murray. It puts them on the map. It puts them in the conversation. It makes the Cardinals immediately relevant. I mean, that's, to me, is it. Look what Patrick Mahomes did to the Kansas City Chiefs. Are you telling me that Patrick Mahomes is that much better than Kyler Murray? I don't think that he is. Do you think that he is?
I think he's a mini Mahomes, but he's just taller.
Okay, fine.
Mahomes.
Yeah, Mahomes is just taller.
Yeah.
Kyler's got great talent. Great talent. Mahomes has great talent. Mahomes has had Tyreek Hill and Kareem Hunt, okay, and went 13-3, and was on the doorstep of one offsides call getting to the Super Bowl.
Sure.
So we're not just going to sit here in Arizona a month before the draft and say Kyler Murray is going to be in the Super Bowl in 2 years. We're not saying that, but we are saying relevant in the conversation for sure. And you want to do that. How long have you guys been out of the conversation? I've spent very little time around Kliff Kingsbury, but I could tell you he's got snap, crackle, pop, bottom line. And I think with Murray, it is going to put you on the map.
By the way, Sal Paolantonio thought that the last time he was in Arizona covering a Cardinals game was the NFC Championship game against the Eagles. So he's all in favor
He's a
of
Philly guy.
Cardinals being on the map so he can actually come to Arizona and, again, enjoy this wonderful weather, especially if you're talking about in early January or even late January. But, again, always appreciate the a national perspective on how people view things going on here in Tempe.
He was adamant. There was no wiggle room. And
Didn't sugarcoat anything.
No, and his background is he was a court reporter, investigative reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer back in the day, and then he obviously became a TV guy and well-respected around the league, a Philly guy. He speaks the truth. He talks to a lot of people. But he was adamant, and I don't agree with it. It could be an option. Who knows how it's going to play out? But the value in April versus August. In August, you're relying on another team,
correct,
quarterback going down, and then learning a new system. It's not a guarantee. Now, Bradford, obviously being experienced, playing in a couple of different systems, that's where the Eagles got a 1-4 from the Vikings. That's different, okay? That's an experienced guy. We're talking about a guy it's still going into his second year trying to find his way around. So I think April, where you got people aren't talking about the Chargers. They want to find the heir apparent. You're not going to play right away, but that's the ideal situation. I think Cincinnati with a new head coach and Zach Taylor, Andy Dalton's on the last year of his contract. Now, can he be there next year? Sure. But I think that's another option. There's other teams And I think the Chargers and Bengals, besides the Redskins and the Giants, and then we don't know what the Dolphins are going to do. I'm assuming they're going to take the best available player. But they may be playing for next year. They got Ryan Fitzpatrick for this year, and maybe they're playing for Tua or the young man at Oregon. So we'll see what that happens there. But there's a couple teams that don't need a quarterback that are looking for that heir apparent where he doesn't have to play right away. And ideally, contract-wise, it makes perfect sense. That's just me thinking out loud.
Yeah, by the way, the series on azcardinals.com, the 1-at-1, that continues looking back at the last 30 number one overall draft picks and that player's impact on the team and the league. Today with Steve Entman, the Colts defensive lineman who was outstanding the first 9 games or the first half of his rookie season, and then just basically one injury after another and didn't do much for his entire career. But again, we talked about this earlier in the week. There is an expectation when you are drafted number 1 that you have to have an outstanding career, borderline a Hall of Fame career, or help your team reach the Super Bowl, dare I say win the Super Bowl, to justify that selection. It's not fair, but that is the reality. And even if you go down to number 2 or just a couple of slots, you can have an excellent career. And I said, you know what? Great pick at number 3 overall. But number 1 carries something different.
Yeah, and Darren and Kyle do a great job at azcardinals.com when it comes to covering stuff and going in depth and getting interviews and quotes. And they're going to release one every day. I think we started with Troy Aikman, Jeff George, and Steve Ettman now. And it's fascinating because at some point they're going to talk about Jamarcus Russell. And there's other quarterbacks. I mean, Schuler was a high pick. He was 3rd overall. So it's interesting because even though we have all this research and we've watched film for the last couple of years, you still – and a lot of times it's what franchise you go to, what coaching do you get, and how much talent you have around it. It usually doesn't – when you're picking a top 5, you probably got some holes on both sides of the ball. So, Mahomes is in a great situation where he sat for an entire year with a quality team, quality coaching staff between Andy Reid, you throw in Matt Nagy, and then you throw in Mike Kafka, the former quarterback. He's going to be a coordinator or head coach down the road. So different circumstance, but you really got to go to a good spot in order to succeed. Otherwise, you feel like you're the savior, and maybe Josh Allen felt that, maybe Josh Rosen felt that, maybe even a guy like Josh Allen felt that because they're relying on those guys for the future, where Baker Mayfield has much more talent around him, and he's ready to take that next step.
Yeah, speaking of talent, locally, ASU's Pro Day was today, taking full advantage of the number of NFL people in town, and I read a quote by head coach Herm Edwards that the scheduling of the Sun Devils Pro Day here on this Wednesday was done on purpose, taking advantage of everyone in town. And according to social media, John Elway, John Lynch were both spotted. Of course, the big name at ASU is wide receiver N'Keal Harry. He did run some routes. Manny Wilkins was throwing. Rennell Wren, who was at the Combine, did not do anything. He's going to stand by what he did at the Combine and had a great Combine. So just something to keep an eye on. And there are early reports that Harry will meet with the Cardinals at some point, among other teams. But you always say, once you're locally, that's a meeting that's almost guaranteed, just because it doesn't count among those 30 visits that you can have.
Yeah, anybody from ASU, NAU, U of A, and anybody that played high school football here or actually was born here, they do not count. So it's not a surprise. I mean, I think he's worthy of considering somewhere in the second round. I don't know if I would consider him at 33. I have no idea what their board's going to look like, but there's a lot of talented players. There's some wide receivers that got some speed early in the draft, and then you got some guys. And, I asked Kingsbury yesterday about the position. He thinks you can get some guys maybe on that Friday or Saturday, where now you're looking at the 3rd round, which they have the first pick. We get into the Saturday 4 through 7, and then they'll bring in some undrafted free agents. So I do think that's a position that they're going to have to address.
Oh, absolutely. There's no question wide receiver will be one of those positions of need come draft time, even and before then. It is a Wednesday here on Cardinals Cover 2 as we broadcast from the Dignity Health Arizona Cardinals Training Center, and doing so in our Bose QC35s. Just go to Bose.com for more information. Still to come, Bird Gang Sound Off, but a reminder coming up this week, in fact tomorrow, the next episode of Cardinals Flight Plan, episode 4, titled New Year's Day, focuses on free agency, but there's also a segment on Chandler Jones and his excitement level for 2019. Here's a sneak peek.
Are you excited to do the 3-4?
Very excited. I know the last time that I played outside linebacker, I led the NFL in sacks.
In trouble, sacked at the 40-yard line, Chandler Jones.
Last year I put on some weight. I was about 280 going into training camp because I was at defensive end. And this year I'm down. I'm probably about 250, 255. So I'm really excited. Vince talked about always having me rushing the quarterback or always going. Most defensive coordinators, they don't want to talk about sacks. They think it's a selfish stat. And he looked at me and said, Chandler, we're going to get you a lot of sacks. And I'm just like, oh, you're speaking my language. So I'm excited. I'm really excited.
March 28th is the day episode for debut, 6 p.m. on Facebook Watch and YouTube. And, of course, you can catch up with past episodes by going to azcardinals.com/flight plan. And for those listening to the podcast, Cardinals Cover 2, I can tell you that, yes, the smile on Chandler Jones's face is one of the largest I've seen since he arrived here in Arizona, talking about what Vance Joseph has in store for him, and that's just basically setting him loose, attack the quarterback.
Yeah, I think he had a similar smile when he signed that contract extension.
Yeah, you're right. That's true.
We just didn't have the video.
Second largest smile.
No. And to me, he looks like the guy that they traded for. I mean, obviously, but I'm saying when you put that weight on his fat
linebacker body.
Yeah, his face got a little bit fuller, whether it was water retention or just eating more because they wanted him to get up to that. He looks like the same guy when they made that trade, and the little baby face and the smile and the white pearlies. He's excited, man, because again, between what they're going to try to do on the D line, then you throw in Jordan Hicks and then T Sizzle and possibly Brooks Reed. I mean, they got some guys that can rush the passer, and a lot of times, sometimes you don't have to blitz. You just win a one-on-one matchup, and then all of a sudden you plaster coverage in the secondary, make your linebackers come up and make some plays. So I know he's excited, and you can just see when you hear him talk about going back to when he played outside linebacker at that weight, he led the NFL in sacks. That's got to be encouraging and give him a lot of confidence.
Absolutely. All right, time for the Bird Gang to sound off here on this Wednesday afternoon. Your questions via social media using the hashtag CardsCover2, hashtag CardsCover2, using the number 2 to get involved in the show. Let's begin with Twitter. A user wants to know, do you think Josh Rosen's performance in the offseason, OTA specifically, will have any bearing on whether or not he is dealt?
Well, the first part of the first phase 1 is strength and conditioning, so coaches are not on the field. That lasts for a few weeks, and then next thing you know, the draft's going to be here. So right now, it's up in the air. Unless they decide to keep him, what's going to happen in OTA? So I don't know. Clearly, if you draft a quarterback with the first overall pick and you have a guy like Brett Hundley and Charles Knauf on the roster, I don't know if you can keep 4. Now, they could bring 4 to camp, but right now it's more of a hypothetical, and I don't know how to address it based on the date.
Yeah, to me, it just doesn't seem realistic to have both the number 1 overall pick, if it's Kyler Murray and Josh Rosen, on the roster together. We move to Instagram. More offensive questions. Do you think we will get more 2 running back sets with David Johnson split out as a wide receiver and Chase Edmonds in the backfield this year?
I think that's the plan, and we've been talking about that for the last year when they drafted Chase Edmonds out of Fordham in the 4th round. David obviously is going to excel on the outside, whether it's in the slot or on the outside, and maybe get that wheelhouse route going. And Chase Edmonds, I think because of his size, sometimes you can't see him behind the line of scrimmage. And obviously it all starts up front, being physical and being able to run the football. But, yeah, I do think we're going to see some of that. And I'm curious to see what kind of role they're going to have for T.J. Logan. The guy's fast, and, he's a playmaker. It's just he hasn't had the opportunities. And I know last year I was told they gave him a handful of plays. It just never came to that. Obviously, they were trying to get David more involved, and we know he didn't put up the numbers that everyone was hoping for. So I do think we're going to see a combination of that, but we're going to see a lot of stuff. I mean, just based on what you see on film from Texas Tech and what you see around the league right now when it comes to getting your weapons in the open field, because they want to create space.
Don't forget DJ Foster.
DJ Foster,
well,
another guy that's true too, and he plays on teams, and he's a guy that obviously they decided to bring back. So good call there.
Defensive question from Instagram. User wants to know about Darius Philon's impact on the run defense and what position will he play, left or right end?
Well, we don't know that because we're still waiting to see what happens with Rodney Gunter. But according to Kliff Kingsbury, he will start from day 1. He's a guy that can play nose tackle. maybe in rundowns and maybe play a little bit on the edge. I got a chance to talk to Anthony Lynn on Saturday at Bruce Arians' golf tournament. He did say they wanted to keep him. They just couldn't afford everyone. So plug-and-play guy, they'll continue to add that position. But I think he's going to be a guy you're going to see, the majority part of that rotation. They want to keep these guys fresh, not only in the fourth quarter, but they want to be fresh in November and December. Again, that's a position they're going to have to continue to add to.
By the way, nice name drop. Just information, but he was very subtle, very, very solid.
He was very nice to me. He told me.
He loves the weather here in Arizona?
No, I'm sure he didn't tell me that because he lives in San Diego. He's probably got a nice little mansion there, a nice little house. He told me they won some games in December with smoke and mirrors. I go, it didn't look like that. He said we could have played a lot better, and he's really encouraged going into the season. But he said, even though our record, they've always gotten off to slow starts, and last year was a little bit better. But now they're in that tough division with the Chiefs, and you throw in the Raiders now, and they're probably on the rise, and then you just don't know what you're going to get out of the Broncos with Flacco. But he thought that the team that they had last year, the majority, they lost to Tyreek Williams, is it? He went to the Raiders. They lost some players in free agency, but for the most part, he thinks they're going to get back. But he wasn't impressed with what they did in December. And it was a name drop.
Appreciate the Bird Gang sending off here on this Wednesday using the hashtag CardsCover2. Hashtag CardsCover2 using the number 2 to get involved in the show. And yes, it was a name drop, but it was good information.
I can come out and say I spoke to this guy that has a Chargers affiliation, and I asked him about the recent signing, and he told me that they wanted to retain him. Is that better?
No, I prefer the Anthony Lynn. It was just a solid use of a name drop to get your point across.
It was nice to see him and Todd Bowles and some other guys at Bruce's. That's the last time he's going to be here. It was kind of awkward because you're going around the course and all you see is Buccaneer stuff.
Yeah, and then Freddie Kitchens wearing Cleveland Browns hat everywhere he was around the Biltmore.
I talked to him yesterday, and he congratulated me on working for the franchise. He goes, why didn't it happen a long time ago? I said, we'll have another conversation. I said, I hope we see you in week 1. Absolutely. He said, we'll see you at some point.
Yes, just don't know when. But the Browns and Cardinals are meeting in 2019.
Oh, Mayfield.
We'll see.
That's a good team, though, man. I mean, there's no cupcakes in the NFL. I mean, you can't take a week off. But the Browns, I'm not ready to put them in the Super Bowl. But listening to John Harbaugh yesterday, he thinks they're the favorite to win that division. But he said they're going to have to earn it.
Well, yeah, and it's one thing to look good on paper. It's another thing to actually look good on the field.
But I think they showed it a little. They were in contention.
No, I know, but every season is a different season.
Yeah, they got some head cases there. I mean, you got Beckham and Jarvis Landry, and I was told, and Steve Wilkes is going to have his work cut out here, they got a lot of mouthpieces on defense, and they got a lot of good players, and everyone's going to want to get paid at some point. So, but they have a really good roster, so if they can just take care of business, stay healthy, but I would love to see us play them in week 1.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see when that schedule is released. Typically
Soon.
Comes out mid-April, at least before the draft, which comes your way the 25th, 26th, and 27th. And with that, we will say so long here on this Wednesday edition of Cardinals Cover 2. Special thanks to those behind the scenes, Tim Delaney, Jim Omohundro, Devin Henry, and Jackson Sipes. For Mike Jurecki, I'm Craig Grialou. We'll do it again on Friday. Cardinals Cover 2. Enjoy the rest of your week.